Assalamu alaikum students. As I agreed in the last session, as we are not able to complete the module 3 and 4 because of the delay in assigning the CRNs. So no worries, as I said, it will be recorded. So this recording will be completing with module 3 and there will be another recording for module 4 also. So here in module 3, we are going to learn about the cryptographic tools part 2 and the user authentication mechanisms. So first, let us understand what is authentication is all about, and then what are the mechanisms, all these things. So we all remember that in the previous two modules we learned about encryption, digital signature, hash function, HMAC, RSA, Diffie-Hellman mechanism. So all these technologies will help to protect the information. So, but before a system allow someone to access its resources, it must answer one very important question, that is, who are you? I mean, the process of answering this particular question is called user authentication. So, which means almost every secure computer system will begin with an authentication. So, before you can access your e-service portal on SEU, or when you log into the online bank, or when you check your email, or when you use your cloud storage, so the system must first verify your identity. So without authentication, the system cannot determine whether you are an authorized user or not. So authentication is the foundation for access control, and the access control will answer what is that particular user role or allowed to do something. So the NIST, the process of establishing confidence that the person presenting an identify electronically is actually that person, that is NIST SP 863.3 version, so which was a guideline that was released in 2016. So remember, user authentication is the process of confirming that a person is truly who they claim to be before granting access to an information system. It begins with identification, followed by verification, and and it is going to form the foundation of access control as well as user accountability. So the user authentication is the first line of defense in cybersecurity. First line of defense in cybersecurity. So without reliable authentication, the access control and accountability cannot function effectively because the system cannot confidently identify its users. So then the National Institute of Standards and Technology developed a model that explained how digital authentication will work. Instead of involving only the user and computer, here the model will include several trusted parties that work together to verify the identities securely. So before the user can log in, their identity must be first verified. And this is the job of the registration authority, RA, which means the the registration authority will carefully check the user's identity before allowing them to register, So a token is something where the subscriber possesses and uses during the authentication process. So the NIST authentication model will separate. Let me show you the diagram. Yes. So the NIST authentication model will separate the authentication into well-defined roles, which will make the digital identity management more secure and scalable. So in modern cloud services, these roles are often performed by specialized identity providers and authentication services, and this separation will help the organizations securely manage the user identity while allowing multiple applications to rely on a trusted authentication process. So the NIST authentication model will explain how the trusted organizations will work together to verify a user's identity. So the registration authority verifies the identities. The credential service providers will issue the credentials. The claimant request authentication. Then the verifier will check those credentials, and the relying party will grant access based on the verification results. So after that, we have a concept of multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication. See, but today the passwords are alone are not going to be enough, right? Why? Because the password can be stolen, it may be guessed, or it may be reused, or it may be fished through the fake website. Something will happen. So to improve the security, the modern system uses multi-factor authentication. In simple way, I can say that instead of asking for one proof of identity, the system will ask for two or more independent proofs. So this greatly increase the security. Like if the system only requires a password, the attacker can immediately access your account. But however, if the system also asks for a fingerprint or a one-time password or a security key, the attacker cannot log in unless they also possess the second factor. So this makes the unauthorized access much more difficult. So that is why multi-factor authentication has become a best practice in modern cybersecurity because it provides multiple layers of identity verification. Even if one factor is compromised, like the stolen password or the attacker, that must still overcome an additional authentication factor. So as a result, the multi-factor authentication is widely adapted by the banks, universities, cloud service providers, and the government organizations to strengthen the account security and to reduce the risk of unauthorized access. So, multi factor authentication will strengthen the security by requiring two or more independent authentication factors, something like as you know, or something you have, or something you are using. So, by combining multiple authentication methods, the um, fact the multi-factor authentication will provide a much higher level of protection than relying on a password alone. So now the risk assessment for your user authentication is required, because now we have learned what is user authentication, what is multi-factor authentication is all about. So now an important question will arise, that should every system use the same level of authentication, should use the same level of authentication. But the answer I can say is no. Like, for example, should an online discussion forum or an online banking system or a government employee portal all use exactly the same authentication method? No, the answer is no. Different systems will have different level of risk. So that is why the organizations perform the risk assessment for user authentication. So the assessment, which means evaluating how much security is required based on the importance of the system and the consequences possible consequences if the authentication fails, if the authentication fails. So in simple way, I can define this. Before choosing an authentication method, before choosing an authentication method, an organization should ask how valuable is the information, what could happen if the wrong person gain the access, and the answer will determine the appropriate level of authentication. So the risk assessment considers three important factors. One is the assurance level, one is the potential impact, and the areas of risk. So assurance level, it answers the question like how certain are we that this user is genuine. So the higher the assurance level, the stronger the authentication requirement is going to be. Then we have like level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. So the assurance level 1 is the confidence with low level, and like for example, online discussion forums or any open portals like this. And level 2 is like moderate, like the professional organizational portals or something like that. And level 3 is high, like patent application systems or some other things like that. And level 4, it is very high, where the government or high sensitive organizational systems will come under this category. So remember, risk assessment will help the organizations to choose the appropriate level of user authentication by evaluating the required assurance level, the potential impact of authentication will failures, and also the associated area of risk. Now, the password based authentication. So many of us we use various types of passwords for the user authentication, right? So almost every one of us has used this method. So whether you log in into the university portal or to your email account or your social media account or even online banking application, you usually start with a username and password. So the password based authentication is the most widely used method for verifying a user's identity. So a user like the user will provide a username or login ID or a password. So the system will check whether these credentials will match the stored records or not. If they match, the user is authenticated. So remember, the password-based authentication will remain the most common authentication method because it is simple and easy to deploy. But however, the passwords alone are no longer considered sufficient for protecting sensitive systems. So the modern organizations strengthen the password-based authentication by enforcing the strong password policies, securely storing passwords using cryptographic hashing with salts, and combining the passwords with multi-factor authentication to provide a significantly better protection against the unauthorized access. So the password based authentication will verify a user identity by comparing the username and password with stored credentials. Now the password vulnerabilities. See, passwords are not going to be perfect. If the user choose the weak password or fail to follow good security practices, the attackers may gain unauthorized access. So that is why understanding the password vulnerabilities is very important. So a password vulnerability is a weakness that attackers can exploit to discover or to misuse a user's password. So sometimes the weakness is caused by weak passwords, poor security practices, careless user behavior. So the first attack is offline dictionary attack. So what it is where instead of attacking the login page, the attacker first obtain a copy of the stored password hashes from the stolen database and the attacker then try thousands or millions of common passwords offline without interacting with the actual system. And then specific account attacks, like the attacker target one particular user. So the for example, the attacker may focus only on a university administrator or a company CEO or a bank manager. So the attacker repeatedly attempt to guess the person's passwords and all. Then third category is popular password attack. So instead of targeting one person, the attacker target many user accounts which are using commonly user passwords like welcome 123 password 123, like Saudi 2026 1234567, like various users may have still used this type of passwords and all. And the fourth category, the attacker attempts to guess one person's password, often using information related to that individual. And the fifth category is many users they create the password based on the personal information like birth date, mobile number, child name, football team or pet name, something like that. Then the next type of attack is a legitimate user logs in but leaves the computer unattended without logging out or locking the screen. So another person simply sit down and use the already authenticated session. Then the attackers often take the advantage of simple human errors. And the next case is many people they reuse the same password across multiple websites. So if one website is compromised, the attackers try to use the same username and password on other services also. So this is known as the credential reuse mechanism. So in overall, the password vulnerabilities will arise from weak password, predictable choice, then password reuse, the user mistakes, and various attack techniques. So the attackers often they target the human behavior rather than the password algorithm itself, rather than the password algorithm itself. Then we have the countermeasures. Then we have the countermeasures for password vulnerability. See, for every type of password issue, we have some countermeasure. We have a countermeasure. So, for the common password vulnerabilities like offline dictionary attacks or the password guessing or the password reuse, workstation hijacking, or even electronic monitoring. So the important question is how we can protect the password and prevent these attacks. That is very important. So we need to implement the countermeasures. We need to implement the countermeasures. So a countermeasure is a security practice, a security practice or the technology that is used to reduce or prevent the security risk. So when you think of it like installing a strong lock, security camera, or alarm system, to protect the building. Similarly, the computer system will use the countermeasures to protect the password. So the first countermeasure is to stop unauthorized access to the password file. Why? Because see the computer systems store the user authentication information in a protected password database. If an attacker steals this database, they may perform offline dictionary attacks against the stored password hashes. Likewise, we have various types of countermeasures like intrusion detection. So, to detect the suspicious login attempts and other malicious activities, we can use the intrusion detection. Then account lockout, it will reduce the brute force and password guessing attacks by limiting the failed login attempts. and strong password policies, like it will encourage long, unique, difficult to guess password. Then training and policy enforcement. It will help the user to recognize and to avoid the common security mistakes. And automatic workstation logout. So it will prevent unauthorized access to unattended computers. Then encrypted network links. So it will help us to protect username and password while they are transmitted over the network. Likewise, so in overall, the password security is strengthened through multiple countermeasures, uh, including secure password storage, intrusion detection, account lockout mechanisms, strong password policies. So for systems containing sensitive information, these measures also be complemented by multi-factor authentication to provide an additional layer of protection. Now, let us learn how to use the hash passwords and salt value. So, there will be one important question that will raise for the cybersecurity experts. Where does the system store the password after we create the account? So, do we think the system store the password exactly as we typed? No. Modern systems should not store the passwords in plain text. Instead, they store a hashed version of the password. So, a hash function is mathematically uh, created mathematical function that converts a password into a fixed length value that is called hash. Suppose your password is like password 123. So now the system will apply a secure hash function, then it will be converted like A7F92B2, something like this. So the system will store the hash value instead of the password 123. So this makes the password stronger, much safer also. If an attacker steals the database, they immediately know everyone password. So this is extremely dangerous. Instead, the system will store only the hash value. Even the administrator usually cannot see the original passwords with salt. Now each student, like for example, will receive a different random salt. Okay. Suppose there are two students choose exactly the same password. Without a salt, both user would produce the same hash. Now, with the salt, what will happen? It is noticed something important. Although both the student use the same password, their strong hash are completely different. So the modern authentication systems will protect the passwords by storing salted cryptographic hashes rather than the original password, and a unique random salt is generated for each password before hashing. So ensuring that identical passwords, it will produce different stored hash value, and this approach significantly strengthen the password security by making offline dictionary attacks more difficult and preventing the attackers from easily identifying password reuse or the duplicate password. So the combine it will be combined with strong password policies and multi-factor authentication. Then the salted password hashing will create a core security practice will create a core security practice in modern information systems. And then we have Unix implementation. So Unix is one of the oldest and most influenced operating system. So many modern operating systems like Linux, Mac operating system, they have been influenced by Unix. So early, the Unix system introduced one of the first practical method for securely storing the passwords. So the original Unix password implementation was a major milestone in password security because it introduced hashed passwords combined with a random salt instead of storing the passwords in plain text. But however, the advances in computing power will have like made older DES based on the password hashing techniques inadequate for protecting modern systems. So today, the organizations they use specialized password hashing algorithms like BCRYPT, SCRYPT, or Argon 2 together with Unix salts. and multi-factor authentication to provide much stronger and protection against the password cracking attacks. Then improved implementation. So it was an important milestone because it introduced password hashing and salt values. But however, still the computer become much faster. As we know, the original Unix password hashing method become too weak to resist the modern attacks. So the technology has changed dramatically. Today, the attackers can use high performance computers, graphics performance processing units, cloud computing to test millions or even billions of passwords which can guess per second. So therefore, the older password hashing methods are no longer sufficient, and the modern systems which need stronger hashing algorithm, large salt values, and more computational effort for each password verification. So in such a way, the password security has evolved the important milestones. So early methods such as the original Unix password scheme and later MD5 based approach represented important milestones, but advances in computing power exposed their limitation. So the modern systems now they use specialized password hashing algorithms like BCRYPT, Argan2, and SCRYPT. So which are all intentionally designed to make password cracking computationally expressive. They combined with Unix salt and strong password policies and multi-factor authentication. So these techniques will provide the robust protection for modern authentication systems. And then password cracking we have. So suppose an attacker has obtained a password database. Now the question will come to the database developer, administrator, as well as the security officer also. Like, how do the attackers try to discover the original passwords? So the password cracking is the process of attempting to discover a user's password by systematically testing the possible passwords against the stored password hashes or the authentication systems. So here the goal is very simple, recover the original password. So fortunately, strong password policies, salted password hashing, and multi-factor authentication can make password cracking much more difficult. See, the password cracking is like the process of attempting to recover the passwords using the techniques like dictionary attacks, rainbow table attacks, password cracking tools, and all. See, the weak and short passwords are much easier to crack, while the modern password hashings or unique salts and strong password policies and even the multi-factor authentication will provide the effective protection against all these attacks. Then the password choices or the concerns, the password choices or concerns. See, interestingly, the biggest weakness in password security is often not the technology. It's not often the technology. It is the password that people choose. It is the password that the people are choosing. So many successful cyber attacks will happen because the user, the passwords. So even if a system uses secure password hashing or salt values or encrypted communication, the account is still at the risk if the user choose a weak password. So when you think of that, like in a way, imagine there is a building with strong wall, security cameras, alarm systems, but the owner leave the front door unlocked. So the strong security becomes inefficient. Similarly, a weak password can undermine other security measures also. So the strength of a password depends not only on its complexity but also on its length, uniqueness, and unpredictability. So the modern security guidance increasingly recommends using long, memorable uh, passphrase instead of short, complex passwords that are difficult to remember. So combined with secure password storage and multi-factor authentication, so the strong password will have the choices greatly to reduce the risk of successful password cracking attacks and all. Then the password choices, or you can say the concerns. As I said earlier, the modern cybersecurity guidance is emphasizing that password length is often more important than the complexity alone. So, a long, unique phrase is generally stronger and easier to remember than a short, complex password. So, the organizations should enforce the minimum password length, and it should prevent the users from choosing commonly used uh, passwords, educate the users about the password security with multi-factor authentication for a stronger protection. So when you look at the real case study that demonstrate why strong password selection is so important, and this study was conducted using password from more than 25,000 students at a research university. Even though the university had a complex password policy, many passwords were still successfully cracked. Sometimes the students they think if my university requires a complex password, then my account must be completely safe. But unfortunately, that is not always true. Even when organizations enforce the password policies, but many users still choose the passwords that are predictable based on common patterns or easier to guess than they are expected. So this case study um, highlights an important this case study highlights an important reality in cybersecurity. So the technology alone cannot guarantee the security, even when the organizations enforce the password policies. So many users still they select the passwords that attackers can recover using the password cracking tools. Effective password security, which requires a combination of strong user choice, secure password storage, then password auditing, and the multi-factor authentication. So the human factor will remain one of the most important aspects of cybersecurity. So then we have the concept of password file access control. Password file access control. See, a password file is a protected database that stores the user authentication information. So the modern system do not store the plain text password. Instead, they store the username, salt value, and the password hash So the password file is one of the most sensitive file in an operating system. Like we need to block offline guessing attacks by denying the access to encrypted passwords. So an attacker first they steal the password file. They first steal the password file. Then they try millions of passwords, guessing offline without interacting with the actual system. If the attacker cannot obtain the password file, they cannot easily perform these offline attacks. So, therefore, protecting the password file greatly will improve the security. So, the first protecting protection is simple. Only authorized users should be able to access the password file. Then shadow password. See, in older Unix systems, the password hashes were stored in a file that ordinary users could read. So this created a security risk where the modern Unix and Linux systems solve this by using a shadow password file. So here the user information is divided into two files. One is public user file and another one is shadow password file. So likewise, we have various mechanisms to handle. So this defense in depth approach will ensure that even if one security mechanism fails, the other protections will continue to safeguard the user credentials. So that is why the password file access control protects stored password hashes by restricting the access to authorized user and the system processes. So the techniques like shadow password file, secure permissions, encrypted backups, operating system updates, and encrypted network communication, which will help to prevent the attackers from obtaining or misusing the password information. Then we need to use a better passwords. We need to use the better passwords. So here, if you see, many users they choose the password that are too short or easy to guess or to reduce across multiple reused across multiple websites and based on the personal information also. So these weak passwords may have the attacker's job much easier. So the goal is to eliminate the guessable passwords while keeping them easy for the users to remember, which means we want the passwords that are difficult for the attackers for guessing and easy for legitimate users to remember. So finding this balance is very important, so that a good password should be like long, unique, difficult to predict, and easy for the owner to remember, and different for every important account. Likewise, so the strong password security depends on both the user behavior and the system control. So the organizations will improve the password security by educating the users, generating strong passwords when appropriate, periodically auditing existing passwords, and proactively rejecting weak passwords during the account creation. Now, how to do proactive password checking? So, checking a password at the time the user create it and rejecting weak password before they are accepted is much better than waiting until later to discover the weak passwords. So here the proactive password checking, which means the system evaluate a password immediately when the user create or changed when the user created or changed it. So if the password is weak, the system will reject it and ask the user to choose a strong password. Like for example, if a user is entering the password like password 123, then the system immediately respond, the password is too weak, please choose a stronger password, and the weak password is never stored. So for that, we have the first technique, that is rule enforcement. This is the simplest and most common method. The system will check whether the password follows certain security rules or not. And the second technique is password cracker. Instead of checking only the password rules, the system tests whether a password can be guessed easily or not. And the third technique is list of bad passwords. So many systems, they maintain a database of commonly used passwords. When a user created a password, the system will check whether it appears in the list. If it does, the password is rejected. And the fourth technique is Markov model. And a Markov model is a mathematical model that learn the common patterns in passwords, whereas it is going to study the frequently used letters, common character sequences, typical password structure. So using these patterns, it predict the password that users are likely to choose. So the proactive password checking will prevent the weak passwords from being used by evaluating them at the time of creation. So when combining the secure password hashing and multi-factor authentication, the proactive password checking significantly reduce the risk of password-based attacks and all. And then we have the concept of token based authentication. So here if you see, a token is a physical device, or you can call a card that help to verify who you are, and the system will check whether you possess the correct token before granting the access or not. So when we think about entering a secure office building, like, so the security guard will ask for your employee ID card, or if you have the card, then you can enter it. If you don't have it, access will be denied, right? So when you think about entering a secure office building, the security guard will ask like that. In the same way, the ID card will act as like a token. Similarly, the computer system will use the token to verify the users. So we have various types of authentication cards. We have various types of authentication cards like embossed card, then magnetic strip card, and then memory card, smart card, likewise. So the token-based authentication will verify a user's identity using a physical object that the user possesses, like smart card or security token. So it represent something that we have, and the authentication factor, and provide a stronger security when it is combined with passwords or biometric authentication and all. Then we have the memory card. So here, a memory card is one of the simplest form of token. It is one of the simplest form of uh, token-based authentication. So a memory card is an authentication card that will store the information but does not uh, process it. So the memory card stores data, cannot perform calculations, cannot make security decisions. Unlike a smart card, it does not have its own processes. So a memory card simply store the information like user ID, account number, access number, card balance. So when the card is inserted or swiped, so a card reader will read the stored information, and then the computer system, not the card, decides whether to grant access or not, whether to grant access or not. So remember, a memory card is a token based authentication. A memory card is a token based authentication device which stores the information but it cannot process it. So it is commonly used in magnetic strip card and prepaid card, and often it provides the stronger security when combined with a PIN or a password. So although the memory cards remain useful for many applications, the modern system increasingly rely on smart cards and multi-factor authentication. So now let us learn about the smart cards. So a smart card is an advanced version of a memory card because it can both store the information and then process it. So it is widely used in banking, government ID card, healthcare, the employee access system, SIM cards in mobile phones. So a it is a card similar in size to a credit card, but containing its own processor, memory, and input output capabilities. So unlike a memory card, a smart card is actually a smart computer because it can store the information, it can perform the calculation, it can execute the security protocol, it can encrypt and decrypt the data. So here the processor means the brain of the smart card. It performs the operations like authentication, encryption, digital signature generation, secure key management, all these things. And then the read-only memory stores the permanent program that installed by the manufacturer, and these programs cannot normally be changed. So the smart card will represent a significant improvement over memory cards because they contain a secure processor capable of performing cryptographic operations. Because of their strong security capabilities, um, the smart cards are widely used in modern authentication systems, and they are often combined with the PIN or biometrics to provide highly secure multi-factor authentication. So then we have the um, electronic identification of cards. So many countries now they issue electronic identity card, EID cards that combine traditional identification with advanced digital security features and all. So a smart card issued by a government that securely store a person identity information, and they support the electronic authentication and all. So an EID, which is a card that can store the personal information, and it can perform the cryptographic operation, it can authenticate the user online, it can support the digital signature. So when you think of it like a traditional ID card along with the secure computer chip. So in this one, because EID cards will combine the secure hardware with cryptographic technology, they provide much stronger identity for verification than the traditional identification cards, and they will play a very important key role in the modern digital services and all. So the electronic identity cards are becoming an essential part of digital government and secure online services. So by combining the smart card technology, the cryptographic key, and the digital certificate, they provide strong authentication which will enable legally recognized digital signatures, and they protect the citizens from identity fraud. And many countries now they use EID cards for e-government, healthcare, banking, taxation, and even for secure access to the public services and all. And then a very important concept, that is biometric authentication. So Instead of asking, what is your password or do you have a smart card? The system will ask, are you really the person that you are claimed to be? That is the biometric authentication. So it answered the questions by recognizing you, unique physical or behavioral characteristics. So the biometric authentication is a method of verifying a person's identity using unique physical or behavioral characters. So every person will have a unique biological feature like the fingerprint, face, iris pattern. So these characteristics are extremely difficult to duplicate and making the biometrics a strong authentication method, a strong authentication method. So then there are various types of biometric authentication like facial recognition, it will use the face structure. Then fingerprint recognition, it will use fingerprint patterns. It will use the fingerprint patterns. Hand geometry, which will use the hand size and shape. Then retina recognition, where it will use the blood vessel pattern in retina. Then iris recognition, it will use the iris texture. Then signature recognition, it will use writing behavior. Voice recognition, it will use voice characteristics. So every category will have different types of advantages as well as the limitations also. Because no single authentication method is perfect, the modern organizations they often combine the biometrics with password the biometrics with password and smart cards to implement the robust multi-factor authentication. So when you look at the operations of a biometric system, first enrollment, then verification, then identification. So we have seen various categories of biometric, right? So a biometric system operation mainly handled in these three phases. One is the enrollment, the second one is verification, and the third one is identification. So a biometric system performs two main tasks. It first register the users. Later, it recognize the users when they try to access the system. So when you think of it like a university student registration system, first the university will ask you to register. Later, when you enter the exam hall, the university verify your identity. Like biometric system will work in the same way. So first you need to do the enrollment and then verification and then identification. So a biometric system first enrolls the users by creating and storing the biometric templates. So during the verification, it is going to confirm a claimed identity using a one-to-one comparison. Using while during the very identification, it determine an unknown person's identity using a one-to-many comparison against all the stored templates and all. Then the accuracy of the biometric authentication, the accuracy of the biometric authentication. So if you see here, even though the biometric systems are highly accurate, they are not that much perfect. Sometimes they may incorrectly accept an authorized person or they reject a legitimate user also. Let me tell you why it is. Because when a user presents a fingerprint, face, or iris, the system does not simply say match or not match. Instead, it first calculates the matching score. It first calculate the matching score. So when you scan your fingerprint, the system compare the new fingerprint, the stored fingerprint template, then it calculate a similarity score. Suppose the matching score ranges from 0 to completely different or 100 to perfect match. So then 98, if for example, that means almost identical, then it has to accept. 92, very similar, accept. But if it is 65, moderately similarity depends on security threshold. So the biometric authentication use a matching score to determine how closely a user's biometric sample match the stored template. Because no biometric system is perfect, the errors as false matches, so accepting unauthorized users and the false non-matches may happen. So an effective biometric system balances security and user convenience by minimizing both the types of errors while maintaining the accurate and reliable authentication. Then we have the remote user authentication mechanism. Remote user authentication mechanism. See, sometimes, but what will happen when a user logs in over the internet? Like, for example, uh, logging into your Blackboard account, or accessing online banking, or signing into your Gmail, or connecting to the company's VPN from your home. So that mechanism is called remote remote user authentication. So remote authentication is more challenging because the communication travel across the network. Attackers may try to intercept or manipulate it. So the process of verifying a user's identity when the users are the authentication server and the user authentication server communicate over a network like internet. So the data travels through routers, switches, internet service providers, wireless networks. So it will create the additional security risk. Okay, because the attackers may try to listen to the network traffic, to capture the login information, to replay the previously captured message, and to pretend to be legitimate users. So what eavesdropping? Okay, so eavesdropping means secretly listening to or capturing the communication between two parties. So an attacker will monitor the network and tries to obtain the username, password, or authentication message. Then we have replay attacks. Instead of stealing the password, the attacker record a valid authentication message. Later, the attacker simply replay the same message. So that is why the remote user authentication must address threats that are less significant in local authentication, particularly eavesdropping and replay the attacks. Challenge response authentication will improve the security by using a fresh random challenge for every login. So it will be like attempting and requiring the client to computer a cryptographic reason, sorry, response using a secret which known only to the user and the server. So the modern protocols like Kerberos, secure challenge response mechanisms, and encrypted communications like TLS, HTTPS, they build on these principles to provide secure authentication over untrusted networks. So there are some potential attacks, suspectable authentications, and typical defense mechanisms, which is given here in this table in a categorical way. Because so far we have learned different authentication methods like password authentication, something you know, token authentication, something that you have, then biometric authentication, something that you are. So now we need to answer one thing, that all these authentication methods can be attacked. Yes, no authentication method is completely immune to attacks. Cybersecurity professionals, they must understand what is the type of attack, which authentication method are vulnerable, how to defend against them. So here if you see the client attack, a client attack target the user device, like laptop, smartphone, desktop computer. The attacker try to guess or steal the authentication credentials before they reach the server. Then we have the token attacks, like the attacker will perform exhaustive search. They will attempt to steal the physical token and all. Then we have host attacks. So the attacker targets the authentication server instead of the user device. Then the third case, eavesdropping, theft, and copying. So in this case, the attack occurs while information travel between the user and the system. And then the fourth type, replay attack. So here, instead of stealing the password, the attacker record the authentication message. Later, later the attacker send exactly the same message again. Then the fifth category is Trojan horse attack. It is one of the most dangerous attacks. A Trojan horse is a malicious software disguised as legitimate software. So the user install it, thinking it as like a safe. So the strong authentication is going to be achieved not by relying on a single security mechanism, but by combining multiple complementary defense that protect the users, devices, servers, and the communication channels. Now, the authentication security issues we have. The authentication security issues we have. So here, if you see, we have client attack, host attack, the eavesdropping, as I said in the previous case. So the authentication is the first line of defense in any information system. If the authentication fails, an attacker may gain access to the personal data of the user, right? So that is a very big issue that the users are facing now. So the authentication system faces the threat from multiple directions, like the attackers may target the user device, that the authentication server, or the communication process itself. So effective protection requires a layered security approach that combine strong password policies, secure password storage with hashing, restricted access to the authentication databases, user awareness training, and the multi-factor authentication. So by addressing both the technical and human vulnerabilities, the organizations can significantly reduce the risk of unauthorized access. So in the same way, we have the replay attacks, Trojan horse, and denial of service attacks. And then we have a simple case study like ATM security problem. Okay, so let me discuss that. Yes. So every one of us, we are using the automated teller machine to withdraw the money or to deposit the money or to do different types of transactions also, right? So here ATM is one of the most widely used banking system in the world, and every day millions of people they use the ATMs to withdraw the cash, to check their account balance, to transfer the money, or to change the PIN numbers. Since the ATMs are handle the financial transaction, they must provide a very strong security. So Redspin is a security auditing company. It investigated ATM systems used by many small and medium-sized banks and credit unions, and the study discovered an important lesson saying that using cryptography alone does not guarantee the security, because the cardholder, the first participant is cardholder. The cardholder is the customer who own the ATM or debit card. The card holder use the card to withdraw the cash, to deposit the money, to check the account balance, or to transfer the fund, many things. So the card holder is responsible for using the card properly, to protect the pin and to pay the charges associated with the card transactions. But who is the issuer? The financial institution that issue the debit card is the issuer. So the issuer maintain the customer bank account, verify the card, verify the PIN, authorize the ATM transaction. And the third participant is the processor. So the processor is a company that provides the technical services for the ATM transactions. So in overall, if you see, an ATM transaction involves three key participants: the card, the issuer, and the processor. While cryptography plays an important role in protecting ATM transactions, the true security depends on the combined strength of authentication, secure communication, system design, the operation controls, and the responsible user behavior. So, in this overall thing, where is the vulnerability? So as we know, a vulnerability is a weakness that in a system that an attacker can exploit to compromise the security. So in this case, the weakness was incomplete protection of ATM transaction data. So in this ATM case study, which illustrated that the strong cryptography alone does not guarantee the complete security. Even though the PIN was protected with triple DES, the other sensitive transaction details will remain exposed because they were transmitted in a plain text. The modern secure systems will adapt a defense in depth approach by protecting the entire communication channel. So using secure protocol, the encrypting sensitive transaction data, and implementing additional controls like fraud detection, network monitoring, and secure system architecture, it is very important. So we have the countermeasures in both short term as well as long term, in both short term as well as long term, because every time based on the severity of the attack, we need to make sure that what type of countermeasure we are taking. So as we know, the countermeasure is a security action that taken to reduce or eliminate a vulnerability or the attack. It's like a solution, it's like a solution for the security problem. So the short term countermeasures are like the immediate action. It is like an immediate action that the organizations can implement quickly to reduce the risk. So they do not completely redesign the ATM system, but instead of allowing the ATM communication to travel together with all other network traffic. So the ATM network will be isolated. The ATM network will be isolated. So effective ATM security, which requires both the short-term and long-term countermeasure, the short-term solution like network segmentation and encrypted communication will reduce the immediate risk, while the long-term improvements will include the encryption of all the customer data, authenticating of both communicating machines, and using challenge response protocols. So it will provide the comprehensive protection against the eavesdropping, reply attack, then unauthorized access. So with this, we completed module 3, and I will provide another recording for module 4. So soon it will be available to you all under the recordings. Thank you all.